Thank you, musicians. Please take your seats as Nick comes to bring us today's reading from Psalm 1, verses 1 to 3. Good, we agree.
Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper.
Great. Thank you, Nick. So it's my privilege this morning to welcome Brian back to Bessells Green. Brian led a church weekend for us 2 years ago now, 2023, and you've brought a crowd, Brian. They don't normally come out like this for me, so it's excellent. For those of you that don't know Brian, he is an author of several books. I have a number of them here, if you'd like to look through them afterwards. He's also a spiritual director who often uses nature and the outdoors as part of leading people in spiritual direction. He's also a regular contributor to Thought for the Day on Radio 4. So I'm really looking forward to what Brian has to share. Once we bought the wood, I sent an email out to a number of friends that I knew worked in the space of the intersection between faith and creation. And the email was titled, "Help, we bought a wood!" Brian responded extremely quickly with, "Wow, wow, wow," in block capitals. And his excitement was palpable in the email. So I wanted to invite Brian to share something of that excitement with us this morning. Why is he excited about this idea that a church should get involved with a local wood, with creation? It seems like a strange idea, perhaps. So why is that exciting just at this moment and at this time? So Brian, I hope I've not given you too big an introduction. Why don't you join me at the front? Let's welcome Brian this morning as he comes to speak to us.
I need to correct you, Charlie, because I didn't respond, wow, wow, wow. I responded, woo-hoo, in block capitals. It is a great joy and delight and honor to be back here again. Feels like coming home in a sense and seeing lots of familiar faces. So thank you for having me. Just literally as we were sitting down to start the service, I needed to check something on my phone, and I noticed an email had come in. I get emails each day from a poet called Rosemary Watola Troma, who is in America. And she writes on all sorts of wonderful subjects, but this was her poem this morning. Skiing up the railroad grade, we'd paused to catch our breath, and from somewhere in the woods, a tree speaks to us in a spruce language we can't interpret. And I am again a young girl at the edge of the forest, believing I understand the trees, the way they call to me, primal and true. How did I ever forget? So that was this morning's poem. Isn't it wonderful how these things interweave in God's grace and encouragement to us all? I've got three small sections to this talk. This talk kind of wrote itself into three small sections. The earth is the Lord's, what's not to love? The goal is soul, to be whole within the whole, and then reaching in, reaching out, in which we'll just think about how a woodland can help us to reach deeper into life and Christian faith and spirituality. And as we do that, we reach out to the world around us quite naturally. But I wasn't sure about an overall title for this at all, and I was sure one would come, and it did indeed this morning when Charlie read Mary Oliver's beautiful poem. So let's call this whole thing The Family of Things, because that is exactly what we are talking about today. I love how in the word kingdom, kingdom of God, there is also contained the word kingdom. Kingdom of God, the family of things. Excuse me. Recently, I read the Booker Prize-winning novel Orbital by Samantha Harvey. I don't know if any of you have read that short but very beautiful book, Orbital, which is not set on the M25, but on the International Space Station, where a group of astronauts who have been living on it for 6 months are still every day awestruck by the sight of Earth. And there's a lovely passage in which one of them watches another sunrise from space. I think they have about 6 every day, and reflects on the experience. By the way, this morning I had a vision of the most amazing sunrise as I was driving here, and it was from the M25, so I get the best of both worlds. But this is from space, and the female astronaut writes this as she looks out of the window to see Earth and the sun rising over it. "No need to speak," she writes. "You only have to look out through the window at a radiance doubling and redoubling. The Earth from here is like heaven. It flows with color, a burst of hopeful color. When we're on that planet," she says, "we look up and think heaven is elsewhere. But here is what the astronauts and cosmonauts think. Maybe all of us born to it have already died and are in an afterlife." I love that. We sometimes need reminding poetically, I think, about just how divine God's creation really is. I love to think that when we are truly earth, feet on the ground earth, we find ourselves heavened too. For the earth is the Lord's, as the psalmist says, and everything in it. And as the American farmer and poet and Christian Wendell Berry writes, there are no unsacred places here on earth. No neutral grey zones where we can just do what we like with it all. There are only sacred places, he says, and desecrated places, right? Now we know there's been so much desecration of God's good earth, don't we? To the point of crisis, to the point of the collapse of biodiversity, the mass extinction of species, climate heating, industrial deforestation on a criminal scale, and so much more. And perhaps we sense too how in so many ways we can be part of the problem instead of the solution as well. How we've lost touch with creation in different ways. From the cultural, most of us live such fast-paced lives these days that we've, in a sense, become out of sync with the rhythms and seasons and cycles of God's creation, right through to the theological. Here in the West, theologically, we came to believe that we're here to lord it over creation as a species. It's just that our version of lording is usually not really our Lord's way of lording, is it? So I can't tell you how instinctively thrilled I was when Charlie told me your church had acquired this patch of woodland. How prophetic it felt, how pioneering, how timely, how redemptive. In fact, I felt so joyful at a visceral level that he did indeed ask me to come and share why, which is a very good question, and one I want to answer as well, and I pray that I can answer it helpfully in the following few minutes, because I believe it really matters. I believe it really matters. And my immediate and most instinctive answer to my joy in your buying a woodland is very simple. What's not to love? I mean, that's a profound question to ask of anything or anyone in God's creation, actually, isn't it? What's not to love? And when I say love, I don't mean consumerist kind of love, like our love for chocolate or our love for our new car or whatever it is. I mean a self-giving, sacrificial, creative, dynamic, divine kind of love that God shows us. And it feels especially apt here in the context in which we're speaking today because of what the theologian Matthew Sleeth calls God's astounding fondness for trees. God's astounding fondness for trees. In his recent book, Reforesting Our Faith, great title, Dr. Sleeth says this: there's a tree on the first page of Genesis, in the first Psalm, which we've read today, on the first page of the New Testament, albeit that's a family tree, come to be known as the Jesse tree, which is rooted in Isaiah's words that a shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse and a branch shall grow out of its roots, words that we will have heard at Christmas. And we're part of that family tree in Matthew 1. And there's a tree on the last page of Revelation, the tree of life, whose leaves will be for the healing of the nations. Yes, please, Lord. Other than God and people, says Dr. Sleeth, the Bible mentions trees more than any other living thing. Isn't that interesting? That's great. That's amazing. There's a whole trail of trees going all the way through from the first page to the very last. So if God loves trees, it makes exquisite sense, doesn't it, for a church to learn more about how and why through caring for a woodland at such a time as this. To stand upon its holy ground and say, this earth is the Lord's. Holy ground, by the way, that's not some marble-clean temple or cathedral floor so much as a carpet of decomposing leaves and roots and mud and seeds and worms and beetles and fungi and footprints and animal tracks. To stand upon its holy ground, to hold a space between you open that's as sacred as any church, in which you can learn more about loving the creation as well as meeting its creator and helping others to do the same. Loving the creation, as well as meeting its creator and helping others to do the same. By the way, in Genesis chapter 2, in the second of the creation narratives that we read in Genesis, we're told that the Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing for the eye and good for food. I wonder if you've ever noticed that before, how the beauty of the trees in that sentence comes before their usefulness. The earth is the Lord's, and what's not to love? All of this is intrinsic to who we have been created to be, to the soul of humanity itself, as well as to my soul and your soul. So I'd like to root this soulfully and theologically and briefly before we continue. And I'll take us back to that second creation narrative I mentioned in Genesis 2 to do that just for a moment. In Genesis 2 verse 7, God takes some earth. I mean, even that is beautiful, isn't it? This is the God who has dirt beneath his fingernails, like any good gardener or person who works the land. God takes the earth, the soil, and shapes a person from it and breathes spirit into him. And Adam becomes what the King James Version of the Bible translates as a living soul. I love that word soul, as I'm sure I shared when I came here before. The Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, meaning the whole of our being. The whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. And in this case, the sum of the parts of physical matter, the soil, and spirit, God's life-giving breath. The two come together to generate something yet more beautiful in their meeting. Now, in Western culture, we have pulled those two back apart from each other again, haven't we? So spirit hardly gets much of a look in sort of science and the study of nature. I was speaking to a chap who used to run one of the wildlife trusts in the south of England, one of the big ones, and I asked him how much is ever spoken about spirituality within those circles, and he said very, very little indeed, if anything. We've taken sort of spirit out of science, and we've taken matter, earth, the stuff of physical matter, the stuff of the earth, which is the Lord's. We've taken that out of our spirituality and religion and faith. We've dismissed it. And so we've got this sort of unholy divide between physical and spiritual. But there is a wholeness of being in their meeting and embracing in that Genesis story. And so soul, for me, relentlessly connects us with and helps us to meet and embrace the greater whole of creation and life in God's kingdom. Because to be whole is to belong to the whole, to be part of the whole. Which helps to explain to me why life can feel so soulless when we're cut off from creation. And why my soul stirs, not just when you see those amazing images of Earth from space and the sun rising behind it, but also when we walk to church on a winter morning like this that we've talked about already, or just go into a woodland on a spring day and see and smell the bluebells. Imagine it now. It's coming. It's coming. And hear the birds singing. We use our senses. And you might sit down or perch against a tree and rest. And it's as if we remember something that we hadn't even realized we'd forgotten in the first place. Something deep down about who we are and how we belong and who we belong to. Why not give thanks in your own heart, just quietly? Close your eyes for a moment. Think of one place in which you come to life, where your soul stirs and you find yourself whole again within the whole. Just go there in your imagination for a moment. It's as if we remember something we hadn't even realized we had forgotten. And for me, that's rather like going through the wooden wardrobe built out of quite a magical apple tree into Narnia. That magical place where we find that the trees can speak with each other to spread the word that Aslan is on the move. And of course, how enchanting, how re-enchanting that we've now found that trees do communicate with each other. And that they support and feed each other and protect each other through their roots, which join up underground with the help of mycorrhizal fungi through a network that has become known as the Wood Wide Web. I mean, you didn't really just think you'd bought a plot of land, 7 acres with a bunch of trees on it, did you? You've bought a living, breathing organism. There's so much that we don't know about the way creation, God's creation, joins up, isn't there? And joins us all up beneath the surface. And thank God for the scientists who are discovering what people like C.S. Lewis intuited somehow all along. But we can all be part of this discovery, this rediscovery, this reconnection at a soulful level. And we can help to lead the way in that, which makes me so excited. Especially if, as the Irish poet and priest John O'Donoghue once wrote, if we approach with reverence, then great things will approach us. The goal is soul, to be whole again within the whole. That helps to explain why this matters for me, that you have care of this woodland. And so, in our final section, I'd like to reflect on reaching in and reaching out. And I just want to share a few ways that trees and woodlands have helped me in my work, in my life, to reach more deeply into my life and my faith. How they might help you, and just, in a sense, by osmosis, how they will help you to reach out in the process to the world around you. My first example is through what we might call presence, or put simply, being here. It's very hard to be here, isn't it, at the best of times? But it matters because as we become present here, we become more present to God's presence, which was here all along. That's why I believe people sense something when they come into a woodland, for example, and find themselves more still, more present. And the trees can certainly help us with this. There's a lovely poem by a guy called David Wagoner called Lost, Being Lost, in which he writes these lines: "Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger." I wonder, can you be here as fully as a tree? Another poet, Denise Levertov, writes in a lovely poem of how a tree in a couple's back garden is fully present to the evening and to the night in a way that the couple who are just very busy and sort of silhouetted in the window doing lots of stuff just aren't present. The tree has what she calls a consciousness undefined. Just imagine a tree for a moment standing there, fully present somehow to God's presence in a way we struggle to be because our busy minds are taking us back into the past or forward into the future, anywhere but here. Be still and know that I am God. One of the most profound spiritual awakenings for me, which kick-started really a journey into contemplative spirituality, that I've had was when I stood quietly at an arboretum. And I went there to be still, as the psalmist instructs. And nothing ever much happens in a hurry in this kind of, thing, does it? But as I stood there just contemplating the trees, I slowly moved my attention to my hands. And it was as if for the first time I realized, oh my goodness, these are my hands and I am here. Wow! It was one of those moments of awakening, right, that set you off on a journey. And what I love to do now, if I'm leading a group or just going on my own in an intentional way into a woodland or to be with trees, is just to say, I am here. And then to turn that round and to then say, and here I am, bringing myself to the space, to the trees, to God within it all, to the moment in openness and humility. The trees, of course, are not God. We get worried about that sometimes, don't we, as Christians? Oh, are we worshipping the trees? Are we getting a bit pagan here? A bit tree-huggy? The trees are not God, but they bear God's touch and they carry God's DNA because they are the Lord's. So we get to experience God through creation. We do, as well as God within us and around us and beyond us. And in a culture of extreme distraction, trees help us to be here, to be present, and then to pay attention. Attention in this culture of extreme distraction is, I think, an amazing spiritual gift to nurture, don't you? As well as to offer the world around us. The French writer Simone Weil says that our attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity when we give it. And our undivided attention is prayer. I was lucky enough, I probably mentioned when I was here before, to have a walk once in the New Forest with Chris Packham, the presenter. And in passing, he mentioned that he can tell what kind of a tree is close by just by listening to the sound the wind makes as it passes through it. I mean, isn't that amazing? And we can't probably aspire to that level of attention, but just spend 1 minute giving your pure attention, say, to brand new translucent leaves on an old oak tree in spring, for example. And something can open within us like a bud. Deep calls to deep. You might say renewal begins. And if it's a miracle that a fresh green leaf can appear on an ancient lightning-stricken oak in spring, and be encouraged if you feel ancient or lightning-stricken this morning, then watching falling leaves in autumn as a meditation on loss or letting go, or contemplating acorns whose shiny shells must fall and fade and crack for their fullness of being to flow out, can be just as powerful as we seek to understand what it means to die to self, to live again, to understand what Jesus meant when he said, unless a seed falls to the ground. In a sense, these are more than illustrations. I'd say the presence of trees can be healing too. Wouldn't you? I once went to a grove of yew trees, an ancient grove of yew trees near Chichester called Kingly Vale, and was feeling very stressed and very mentally out of sorts when I went there. And I lay down for half an hour on a low branch. I know it was half an hour because I set my timer for 30 minutes, so that's a precise figure. On a low branch of this 1,000-year-old yew tree. If you haven't tried it, please do it. And I remember coming away reset in a very profound and lasting way. I like to think that as my restless mind quietened and as I found rest within God's creation, I met afresh the me within as well as the you. Thank you very much. I've been building up for that one. Tree jokes, I'm cultivating them. But healing is a word I have frequently heard used in connection with the outdoor retreats that I run with my friend, the botanist Howard Green. It's the word that comes up most in people's feedback. And I have no doubt it can be a feature of your own woodland as you steward, as you look after it, as you step into it. We sometimes take groups to a wood where coppicing takes place. It's run this particular wood is run by the National Trust, and they make sure that in this coppicing process, absolutely nothing is wasted at all. So a patch of woodland, the trees are cut low every 8 years or so, and everything gets used, every single last twig for different purposes. So we'll stand in silence as a group, prayerfully beside piles of coppiced logs and twigs to offer the moment as a prayer for all the seemingly wasted days and years of our lives. Remembering that like the coppiced tree, nothing is wasted in God's economy. And it takes people to a very profound place of healing beyond words. We'll reflect too on how the light can now get into a woodland floor in areas that have been cleared, have been coppiced, meaning that seeds which have lain dormant for sometimes years and years and years may now germinate, and a woodland floor can be just covered, carpeted in wild flowers and attract back butterflies and insects that haven't been there for a long time. Healing is not just about ourselves, but about the land as well. Even though, of course, the woodland floor of our own life can benefit from a clearance to let the light in too. We work together. Maybe you'll get to do some coppicing. Who knows? Who knows? And discover what it means to work soulfully, spirit and matter, with God's creation in true partnership, to lord it well. Being here, paying attention, finding healing. Then briefly, prayerfulness. Trees for me are just an incredible, let's not even say aids to prayer, I would say companions in prayerfulness. They simultaneously reach down into the hidden depths and up to the heavens at the same time, don't they? And if you're willing to spend time with them, you might indeed sense more of your own deep rootedness in the ground of God's being. Or you might sense the strength of what you stand for. Lignin apparently is the substance that makes trees so strong yet so flexible in the wind. You might be inspired by the surface area of leaves and trees that soak up light and air, to turn your face to the light and life of God's love with them. Or be encouraged that new life will come to you and through you in season, like bud, like leaf, like blossom, like fruitfulness, like that tree. In Psalm 1, remain in me, Jesus said. You may take comfort from the way the scars from a broken branch will heal in time. I'm moved by the hospitality of a tree, which sustains an entire ecosystem through God's kingdom or God's kingdom economy of reciprocity, an economy in which the currency is one of gift, given and received. It's a different way of being that can inspire us to find different ways of being as we go forward. And I love how the space between the branches and leaves of a tree, if you pay attention, is more beautiful than a cathedral, isn't it? And can speak of the space that God has created within us, which is just as beautiful. Gosh, when a church acquires a wood, you've got multiple cathedrals to start worshipping in, as well as a building. So we're coming into land now, being here, paying attention, finding healing, cultivating prayerfulness. And then finally, for me, there is, amongst a whole host of things that we can talk about, deepening a sense of place. Remember lockdown? I imagine you do. It wasn't an easy time, was it? But remember how a single lockdown path was a gift of such amazing worth. And though we still tend to see limitations as negative, a tight perimeter can become like an aperture of a camera too, an opening of insight and vision onto a world we might otherwise miss in the busyness and the rush. And your woodland may well be that place of opening and vision. Here is where we get to practice life, says the poet Patrick Kavanagh. To know fully even one field or piece of land is a lifetime's experience. It is depth that counts, he says, not width. I'm reminded, I don't know if you've heard of the vicar and naturalist Gilbert White, who studied the nature of one single parish, tightly bounded small parish in Hampshire, Selborne, for 20 years of his life when he was a curate there. And he just watched really carefully in this one small parish all the wildlife and nature. And he made detailed notes of when, for example, which day the first swallow arrived and when he first saw the almond blossom come into blossom. And climate scientists still use his work, have used his work as they track the changes now in the seasons that are happening. I wonder what you can discover in your small patch of land as you are present, as you pay attention, as you find hidden depths in that aperture, in one small place that opens a depth of being and belonging for you with God, the Creator, with each other, with creation, and with your community around you. The reaching in and the reaching out can go on and on and on, can't it? Prayer trails, guided night walks. My wife was saying to me how much she as a woman would love to be able to walk safely at night and look at the stars and the moon and all that sort of thing. Education for kids who can no longer name an acorn, a bluebell, chestnut, and so on. A, B, C, D. Take it through the alphabet. A safe place to play. Rewilding. Partnerships with wildlife trusts, art workshops, bushcraft, mindfulness activity. There's so much potential within this one microcosm of a patch of land reconsecrated. But if you feel overwhelmed thinking about it, just narrow it down to a single tree, either in your imagination, like the tree in Psalm 1, or a tree in that woodland, or a tree just on your very local patch. A tree that goes nowhere, rooted and rising as it is, yet which embarks every single year on the most divine, extraordinary journey through 4 seasons. This is your chance to go on a great journey together too, to love creation, to meet its loving Creator afresh out there within it all, and to help others to do likewise. The earth is the Lord's, so what on earth is not to love?
Thank you, Brian. It's just lovely to hear your enthusiasm and your passion and your wisdom and your experience, and you to bring that and share that with us. And what Brian hasn't mentioned today is Brian is a sufferer with long COVID, and for him to stand up and bring that energy this morning, there will be a cost in the next couple of days, and you will pay for that. But we are very grateful to you for giving that to us this morning and bringing your wisdom and experience.